I'm Stephen Meneses. I'd like to introduce Melissa Cribbins, Democratic candidate for Senate District 5.
Hi, Stephen. Thanks so much for having me today.
It's a pleasure to have you. Tell us about your positions and your experience that would encourage a senior or person with disabilities to vote for you.
Absolutely. So I'm currently a Coos County Commissioner, and so I've been an elected official for about 7 years now. And as such, I've had a lot of opportunities to work with seniors and people with disabilities. But on a very personal level, I have also had my own family members that have been senior citizens that have lived with us, that we've really had that experience of knowing what it's like to be a senior and have to work really hard to go to a lot of doctor's appointments and need somebody to transport you. So one of the things that's really important to me is that we have good health care on the coast, and accessibility to health care is critical. When my father was ill, we had to drive to Portland for all of his treatments. I was always just really thankful that I was in a position where I could help him by taking him to Portland, because some people don't have family members that can drive them back and forth. So it's really critical to me that we continue to have good, accessible health care on the coast for people who need it, especially seniors and people with disabilities.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Oregon Project Independence is a cost-effective program that keeps seniors and people with disabilities in their own home. And yet every year proposed funding for OPI is significantly cut. If elected, what will you do to protect funding for OPI?
I would be a strong advocate for OPI funding. I think it's critical that seniors and people with disabilities are able to stay in their homes. You know, one of the things that we need to remember is it's really important that we have complete communities. And part of having complete communities means that everybody gets to stay in a home, and a home where they've already built their community. So I would be a strong advocate for continued OPI funding. And I think it's, one of the things that my husband and I have really strongly communicated to our children is that it's important that we help the people that have cared for us stay in their homes. I've had my mother-in-law, my grandmother-in-law, and my father all live with us during different times when they were sick, and we cared for them. I realize not everybody has that opportunity, and so it's important that we preserve funding and we allow people to stay in their homes whenever possible. Thank you.
You're welcome. How would you prioritize state funding, including funding that is matched with federal funds, such as Medicaid, for services to an increasing senior and people with disabilities population?
I think COVID has really made it clear that it's more important than ever that everybody has access to health care. And one of the things that I appreciate that's happened during COVID is that we've kept everybody on Medicaid, and we haven't required anybody to prove up their ability to stay on there. I would definitely prioritize, continued funding for medical care and making sure that people don't have to choose between paying for their prescriptions and paying for their bills. There's a tobacco tax that's proposed right now that will be on the next ballot. I have been an advocate for that. I feel that it's critical that we get a stable, steady funding stream for Medicaid in order to make sure that we're not kicking anybody off Medicaid that needs to be on there, especially our seniors and our people with disabilities.
Very good.
Thanks.
During this time of increased risk of homelessness and food insecurities, what will you do on a state level so that seniors and people with disabilities no longer face a lack of accessible housing and receive appropriate nutrition?
Housing is such an issue statewide, and I've noticed every county in the state of Oregon has a problem with housing right now. We just all have problems with housing for different reasons. Here on the coast, we have problems with housing for many different reasons, depending whether you're on the middle part of the coast or the south end of the coast. But people not only need access to housing, they need access to housing that's of a certain standard and where they know that they'll be safe. So as a county commissioner, I've been the liaison to Coos Health and Wellness, which is our public health and mental health department. And I've been a strong supporter of investing increased and continued resources in housing for people who are struggling with mental health problems or people that are at risk of becoming homeless. We need to make sure that we're intervening early in cases where people are just about to lose their housing or where they have just lost their housing, because we know that if we can get those people back into housing or preserve the housing that they're in, they're less likely to suffer from all the problems that come from being houseless. We also need to make sure that we are protecting those populations that are the most at risk, such as seniors and people with disabilities. We need to identify areas where government can really make a difference and make those critical investments in areas where they make the most difference. And I think sometimes this feels like an elephant, right? It's such a big problem, but how do you eat an elephant? You eat it one bite at a time. And that's what we all have to remember. Thanks.
Sounds great. What are your plans to improve the health of vulnerable seniors and people with disabilities, including people of color who traditionally suffer from more health disparities due to pre-existing conditions?
Yeah. I think part of that is access to healthcare, right? The ability to have health insurance and the ability to access that health insurance. I became a commissioner just as we were changing the model of how we provided healthcare in Oregon to this new coordinated care model. And that's made a huge difference for a lot of people. I've talked to many, many people. I serve on the Community Advisory Council for our local coordinated care organization, which has to be a majority of people that are on the Oregon Health Plan. And there are so many people on there that have never had health insurance before in their life. And for those people, one trip to the doctor can be the difference between catching an illness right at the beginning or potentially not going and discovering later when it's too late to help them. So I think, early care is a critical thing, and that's part of continuing that Medicaid funding so people are getting early preventative care and they are able to catch diseases before they become terminal or, require a lot of treatment. So it's important that it's important that we are lowering the cost of prescription drugs because that's one of the primary drivers of the health insurance rate increases. And we need to make sure that we have everyone's voice at the table when we're making these decisions, particularly our underrepresented populations and the ones that are the most vulnerable and the most susceptible because of pre-existing conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa, for your very candid responses. I appreciate your responses. Once again, this is Melissa Cribbins, Democratic candidate for Senate District Number 5.
Thank you so much.